One night in September of 1861, soldiers went to a house in Baltimore. They arrested a man named Frank Key Howard. They did not have a paper that allowed them to arrest him. They also did not tell him what he had done wrong. Howard's crime was writing an article in a newspaper that criticized President Abraham Lincoln. He was taken to a prison called Fort McHenry. Howard thought it was strange to be in that fort. His own grandfather had written a famous song about the flag flying over that same fort. Now, Howard saw the American flag and felt he was held by a tyrant, a leader who has too much power and is unfair. This was not the only time the government arrested people without clear reasons. That same summer, Lincoln's government arrested many important people in Baltimore. They arrested the city's mayor, the police chief, and many lawmakers from the state of Maryland. These people were also put in prison without charges and without a trial. Newspapers in the North became very angry about this. They used strong words to describe Lincoln. Some newspapers called him a dictator. They said his actions were wrong and took away people's freedom. Today, most Americans think of Abraham Lincoln as a great hero. We remember him as the person who saved the country from breaking apart. He also helped end slavery in the United States. Many people see him as a very good leader, almost like a saint. There are many statues of him, and schoolchildren learn about his important life and speeches. He is a symbol of American strength and freedom. But this story will look at another side of Lincoln. It will look at Lincoln as a leader who used very strong power during a difficult time. He put many people in jail without trial. He stopped some newspapers. He took away important rights from citizens. These actions make us ask a very big question. How could the same man who saved American democracy also be accused of destroying the rights and freedom of its people? This is the main question this story will try to answer. 2. A country in trouble. When Abraham Lincoln became president on March 4, 1861, the country faced a great problem no one had seen before. 7 states had already decided to leave the Union. Soon after, Fort Sumter was attacked. The whole idea of America, that a country could stay together, was in danger. The Constitution, the country's most important law book, did not say what to do in this situation. It had rules for new states joining, but nothing about states leaving. It gave Congress the power to declare war. But what if the enemy was fellow Americans? The Constitution also mentioned stopping a special legal protection called habeas corpus during a rebellion. But it did not clearly state if Congress or the President had this power. Lincoln's previous president, James Buchanan, believed the government could not use force against states that left. He thought it would go against the idea that people must agree to be governed. So Lincoln had a hard choice. He could do nothing and watch the country break apart, or act strongly to save the nation, even if it was not clearly allowed by law. The biggest danger came quickly in Baltimore, Maryland. Maryland was a state with slavery, close to leaving the Union. The only train line connecting Washington, D.C., the capital, to the northern states ran through Baltimore. On April 19, 1861, a crowd attacked soldiers passing through the city. 4 soldiers died. People wanting to leave the Union then burned train bridges and cut telegraph lines. This made it hard for Washington, D.C. to get help or send messages, almost cutting off the capital. Lincoln acted very fast. He did not wait for Congress to meet. He called up state militias and made the National Army and Navy bigger. He spent $2 million without first asking Congress. He also stopped ships from going to southern ports. Most importantly, he allowed the special legal protection of habeas corpus to be stopped in the area between Philadelphia and Washington, D.C. Lincoln took strong actions to meet the emergency, using powers no president had used before. 3. A president's hard choice. After acting quickly to save the capital, President Lincoln made another difficult decision. He suspended habeas corpus. This is a very old and important law. It means the government cannot put a person in jail without telling them why or giving them a trial. It protects people from being held unfairly. However, the Constitution says habeas corpus can be stopped during a rebellion or invasion if public safety needs it. But it does not say who can stop it, the President or Congress. On April 27, 1861, Lincoln allowed military leaders to stop habeas corpus along the railroad from Philadelphia to Washington. This was to keep the path to the capital safe. Many people were arrested. During the war, over 14,000 civilians were put in jail without charges or trials. One famous case was John Merryman. He was a state leader in Maryland. On May 25, 1861, soldiers arrested him at his home. They said he helped destroy railroad bridges. Merryman's lawyer asked for habeas corpus. The case went to the highest judge in the country, Chief Justice Roger B. Taney. Chief Justice Taney said that Lincoln's action was wrong. He ruled that only Congress, not the President, could suspend habeas corpus. Taney believed Lincoln had broken the law. But President Lincoln did not agree. He chose to ignore the Chief Justice's order. Lincoln asked a famous question about this choice. Are all the laws but one to go unexecuted, and the government itself go to pieces, lest that one be violated? He meant that sometimes, in a very serious crisis, a leader might need to bend one rule to save the whole system of rules. For Lincoln, saving the United States was more important than following every single law perfectly at that moment. He felt that if the country fell apart, all laws would be lost anyway. This was a very hard choice for the president. 4. Stopping free speech. President Lincoln started to use military courts to try regular citizens. These courts were usually for soldiers, but now they judged people far from any battlefield, even when normal courts were open. By the end of the war, military courts had heard about 5,000 cases involving more than 15,000 civilians. Many people were worried because civilians did not get a jury in these military courts. One important case was Clement Vallandigham. He was a politician from Ohio. He often spoke against the war. In May 1863, Vallandigham gave a speech. He said the war was not to save the country, but to free black people and hurt white people. Soldiers arrested him at his home a few days later. A military court found him guilty of speaking against the government. They sent him to military prison for 2 years. Critics said this was wrong. Lincoln argued that stopping such talk was needed to help the soldiers fighting. Lincoln's government also began to control how news traveled. In early 1862, the Secretary of War took full control of all telegraph lines. These lines sent messages and news across the country. All messages now had to go through the War Department. This meant the government could read and stop any news it did not like. This was done to keep information from helping the southern states, but it also censored the public. Many newspaper editors were arrested. They were put in jail for printing stories that criticized the war or Lincoln. Federal officers also stopped some newspapers from being delivered by mail. Lincoln himself ordered the arrest of editors from the New York World after they printed a false report. Many historians say this was the most extreme stopping of free speech in American history. In March 1863, the country needed more soldiers. Lincoln signed a law for the first national draft. This meant many men had to join the army. However, rich men could pay $300 to avoid serving. This amount was almost a year's wages for a working man. Many poor people felt this was unfair. Because of the draft, big riots happened in New York City in July 1863. For 4 days, angry crowds protested. They attacked people, burned draft offices, and fought with police. More than 100 people died. Lincoln sent soldiers to stop the riots. He continued the draft, showing that he believed keeping the country together was more important than public anger. 5. A War for Freedom. Chapter 5. A War for Freedom. President Lincoln took many strong actions during the Civil War. One of his most famous was the Emancipation Proclamation. This important paper said that many enslaved people were free. But Lincoln did not issue it just because it was the right thing to do. He saw it as a plan for fighting the war. This proclamation was a military strategy. It was a way to make the southern states weaker. Enslaved people were a big part of the South's labor force. They worked on farms and helped the Southern economy. By saying these people were free, Lincoln hoped they would leave their enslavers. This would hurt the South's ability to fight. They would lose workers and their power would grow smaller. Lincoln waited for a Union Army win before he announced it. After the Battle of Antietam, when the Union did not lose, he felt the time was right. It made the proclamation seem like a strong move by a winning side. However, The Emancipation Proclamation did not free all enslaved people immediately. It only freed those in the states that were fighting against the Union. It did not free enslaved people in states that had stayed with the Union or in southern areas that Union soldiers already controlled. This showed it was a war tool meant to hurt the enemy, not a full statement of freedom for every single enslaved person right away. Lincoln believed that strong actions were needed to save the nation and the Constitution. He said that some things that were usually against the law could become legal. This was true, he argued, if they were absolutely necessary to save the country and its main laws. He explained that the Constitution meant different things in times of peace and in times of war. He compared it to medicine. Good medicine for a very sick person might be bad for a healthy one. So, special and extreme steps could be right when the nation was in great danger. He felt he had to make these hard choices to keep the United States together. 6. Many people disagreed. Many people in the North did not agree with President Lincoln's actions during the war. They believed he was using too much power. One group was called the Copperheads. These were Democrats in the North who wanted peace, not war. They said Lincoln's actions went against the Constitution and took away people's rights. Most Copperheads lived in states like Ohio, Indiana, and Illinois. They worried that freeing enslaved people would bring many black workers to the North. They thought this would make it harder for white workers to find jobs and lower their pay. When Lincoln announced the Emancipation Proclamation, the Copperheads were very angry. They called him King Abraham and a tyrant. They felt his government would put anyone in prison who spoke against him, just as Clement Vallandigham was arrested. The highest court in the country also showed its disagreement. Chief Justice Roger B. Taney, a very important judge, said that Lincoln had acted against the law when he stopped habeas corpus. Taney believed that only Congress had the power to do this, not the president. He warned that if military power became stronger than civil law, then people would lose their freedom. Taney said that citizens would live under the will of army officers, not under a government of laws. But President Lincoln did not listen to the Chief Justice's order. He said that he needed to do what was necessary to save the country. Newspapers also printed many angry words. Some called the Emancipation Proclamation a criminal wrong. Others used words like tyrant to describe President Lincoln. Even people writing letters to Lincoln sometimes called him an unconstitutional tyrant or a dictator. Even some people who were on Lincoln's side were worried about his power. For example, a general once closed a newspaper in Chicago because it criticized the government. But Lincoln did not like this. He ordered the general to let the newspaper open again. Lincoln said that generals should only stop newspapers if there was a very clear danger to the army. This showed that even with all his power, Lincoln still fought about people's freedoms. He made sure elections still happened, and he allowed people to criticize him loudly. He always said his strong actions were only for the time of war and would end when peace returned. 7. What we think now. Many people today look at Abraham Lincoln's actions during the Civil War. Historians have different views. Some earlier thinkers, like scholars Arthur M. Schlesinger and Edward Corwin, said Lincoln acted like a despot, or his presidency was a dictatorship. This idea was sometimes called a constitutional dictatorship. It means that in a very serious crisis, a leader might need to take strong, even unusual powers to save the country. They would then give up these powers when the danger passed. Today, some historians still say Lincoln broke parts of the Constitution to save the nation. Others believe he had good reasons for his choices, and many people at the time agreed with him. They point out that he faced the worst crisis in American history. Still, the question of who can suspend habeas corpus, the right to be charged with a crime, is debated, as is the use of military courts for everyday people. Lincoln's presidency set a strong example for future leaders. When other presidents faced big national problems, they sometimes looked back at what Lincoln did. This created a path for presidents to use more power in times of crisis. For example, during the Second World War, President Franklin D. Roosevelt used his power. He ordered many Japanese Americans to leave their homes and live in special camps. He said this was necessary for the country's safety during wartime, much like Lincoln had. But unlike Lincoln's arrests, which were for alleged disloyal acts, Roosevelt's actions placed people in camps simply because of their race. Later, after the September 11th attacks, President George W. Bush's government also used Lincoln's example. They allowed special surveillance and held people suspected of terrorism in places like Guantanamo Bay without regular trials. Critics said this was different because the war on terror did not have a clear end, like the Civil War. People worried that these powers might not be given back. These events still make us ask hard questions. When is it right for a leader to take away some freedoms to keep the country safe? Is it okay to break some laws to save the entire system? Lincoln thought it was. But his actions also show that when leaders get special powers, it can make it easier for future leaders to claim the same powers, even if the situation is not as bad. This creates a difficult balance between safety and freedom that Americans still discuss today. 8. A hero or a tyrant? Abraham Lincoln is often remembered as a great hero. He saved the United States from splitting apart and helped bring an end to slavery. Many people see him as a symbol of freedom and democracy. But his time as president also shows us another, more difficult side. Some people in his own time, and even some historians today, called him a dictator. Lincoln took many strong actions during the Civil War. He stopped basic rights, like habeas corpus. This meant that people could be put in jail without being told why or having a trial. He also used military courts for regular citizens and shut down some newspapers that did not agree with his government. He used presidential powers in ways no leader had before. It is strange because his actions, which seemed like those of a tyrant, helped him save the country and keep democracy alive. He felt he had to break some rules to save the bigger rules and the nation itself. He suspended democracy temporarily to make sure it would last forever. This is an uncomfortable idea for many, a true paradox of his leadership. Lincoln himself knew these choices were hard. He once said that he did not control events, but that events controlled him. He felt that the huge problems of the war forced him to make very tough decisions. These choices changed American history forever and still make us think today. This story teaches us an important lesson. We need to be careful when leaders say there is a big emergency and they need special powers. We should always ask hard questions when basic freedoms are at risk. Lincoln's legacy shows us how difficult it can be to keep a country safe and free at the same time. So, was Abraham Lincoln a hero who saved the nation, or a tyrant who took away people's rights? Perhaps he was both. His actions leave a mixed history that we still discuss today. What do you think about President Lincoln's actions? Do you believe he was right to use such strong powers to save the Union and end slavery? Please share your thoughts.
Hey there! Just a second before you go. If you learned something new today, please give this video a like, write your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. It only takes a second, and it really, really helps to create even better English videos for you. Your support means the world. Thank you.